Bethel Cemetery, 30 miles south of Valdosta, Georgia. This is where Willie James Williams's battered body was laid to rest after his life ended abruptly in September 1998.
Hi, I was just wondering if maybe you can tell me who Willie James Williams was?
I'm not sure who that is.
Okay, you have a nice day. I wanted to ask if maybe you can tell me who Willie James Williams was. You don't know who Willie James Williams was? Okay, thank you.
Was he the gentleman that was beat up in the jail or died in the jail?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
James was well thought. A lot of people liked him. He was a clown, you know. I mean, he just kept you laughing all the time. And everybody liked the James. You know, people couldn't believe it when they heard that he was dead, you know.
He was just a nice, outstanding person. He didn't bother nobody. He didn't. What harm he did it to himself because he was drank. But for us and bothering anybody, picking the fact, he didn't do that. He was just a nice person. And if he could help you, he would help you any way he could.
Well, I can say my dad, he was a loving person. He loved to see somebody happy, you know, no matter what type of person my dad was. You should have treated him like a human being. I hate that it had to be my dad to be the example of change here in Valdosta.
I said, but there are 3 unassailable facts in this case. He was okay, he was arrested and beaten, and he's dead.
Who was Willie James Williams? That's a question that provokes heated discussion among many of the people of his hometown of Valdosta, Georgia. Valdosta is the county seat for Lowndes County. The reason that such a simple question fails to elicit a simple answer is that in death, Willie James Williams has become a symbol, and as is often the case with symbols, this one-time, middle-aged African-American man now represents different things to different people. For some, he is a martyr, a victim of official misconduct and police brutality, a symbol of blatant racism and a treacherous criminal justice system. Others see only a criminal who got what he deserved, a ne'er-do-well, a disposable member of society.
Everybody dislikes the law until they need them.
Why don't they march when a deputy gets beat?
I don't think they hear about it.
They don't want to hear about it.
Oh.
Yeah.
If you do absolutely everything by the book, just right, it doesn't matter what the results are. It doesn't matter that you did it right. There will always be people who will say you covered it up.
Conflict, we are told, is precisely a contest over meaning. Which side will ultimately get to assign meaning to the death of Willie James Williams? That question hinges largely on another. Who killed Willie James Williams? Whether or not that answer is forthcoming is unclear. One thing that is clear, however, is that some individuals in Lowndes County appear less interested than others in discovering what really happened. Valdosta is a small city of 41,390 people. The population is roughly 2/3 white and 1/3 black. The region is largely rural. 48% of Lowndes County, in fact, is classified as rural. Per capita income for whites is $35,200. For blacks, it is half of that, or $18,600. Despite decades of official racial integration, signs of economic progress among African Americans in this part of Georgia are few and far between. In fact, 38% of the county's African Americans live below the poverty line. David Williams is a professor of United States history at Valdosta State University.
But in terms of economic progress for African Americans, it's just not there. We're a lot of people refer to this as the era of affirmative action. In fact, at best, it's the era of tokenism.
Conversations with people from various walks of life in town corroborate Dr. Williams's view.
Well, it's not been good, and of course you can tell that by the number of, say, bank presidents that are black. And until you have a good mix of people in important positions, you're not going to have happy racial relations.
Do our public officials practice discrimination?
Yes.
My mom, she has a Lexus, so she lets me drive it. So I'm riding along in Valdosta, in my mom's Lexus, and I was pulled over by a DEA, and they pulled me out the car. When they asked me to get out the car, they didn't even ask to see the ID and stuff, and I asked them about that before I even got out the car. Well, I kind of lost my temper though, but it was okay.
The powerful white, of which I am a part, are able to cloister ourselves in gated communities in a way that we physically are going to be removed from it. I think we lose our humanity, we lose our souls in the process.
Well, the town has never really left the 60s. Valdosta have never left from where it was segregated. Valdosta have always been a black and white town.
For self-preservation, if you are African American, if you want to be successful in Valdosta, you must conform to the local establishment. Meaning this: first, you must keep quiet. You must do anything that's divisive. You must play along. You mustn't say anything that's out of character. You must not complain about those who are in power, such as Sheriff Polk, Miller, McLean, or Langdale. If you want to get ahead in Valdosta, in African American, you would you metaphorically kiss the right button and not complain, and stay on your knees and pray.
They don't want any change. It haven't really been any change. You do what you do over there and don't bother nobody or don't make no fuss, and it's all right. And we won't do anything.
Nothing better symbolizes the rift in Valdosta's race relations than the James Beck overpass. Built in 1981, ostensibly to eliminate traffic delays due to passing trains, it cut minority businesses off from Valdosta's main commercial district. The number of customers to black-owned businesses declined. Many businesses experienced hard times, and many closed their doors. The impact of such foreclosures was felt not only by the proprietors, but also by their employees and their families, as well as nearby property owners who watched the value of their land and assets plummet. Put simply, the overpass separated Valdosta, north from south, black from white. Valdosta State University political science professor Dick Sager is chairman of the Valdosta Historical Preservation Commission.
But it did serve the purpose that these things oftentimes serve, and that is just became a Berlin Wall between they'd been north and south of town. So I think from that standpoint, it's an urban renewal disaster, and that it probably has made access from one end of town to the other a little easier.
On September 2nd, 1998, Mr. Willie James Williams, aged 48 and a resident of 410 Canal Street, died while in custody of the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department. 30 hours earlier, a car driven by Williams, his niece's car, had crossed the center line of Lee Street, and Williams was pulled over by Lowndes County Sheriff's Deputy Kevin Farmer. Deputy Farmer's call to dispatch revealed that Williams was driving without a valid driver's license.
Pull the subject up on ABRs and see what you can find on it. That's the correct date of birth.
I'm thinking that 10 block was one. Clearly, ready to go down.
Don't. ain't got no license, James. Is that your name?
In addition, Williams was in violation of parole as a habitual traffic violator. A search of the car undertaken later turned up a loaded handgun and a loaded shotgun. It was never revealed to whom these guns were registered, nor is it known whether Williams knew the guns were even there. Farmer placed Williams under arrest. "30 hours later, Williams was dead. What went wrong? Newspaper reports quoted Sheriff Ashley Polk as saying that Williams died as the result of injuries sustained in a fall. He also said that Williams had resisted arrest, necessitating the use of force. This seemed to placate Valdosta's white community, much of which resides on the north side of town. But it was a different story on the south side. Mr. Williams was the third African-American man to die under questionable circumstances while in the custody of Lowndes County Sheriff's Department since Sheriff Ashley Polk took office in 1993. In addition, a recently dismissed prison guard, Mr. Larry McDougall, was reporting that violence at Polk's jail was commonplace, that in fact he had been fired for not participating in the beating of inmate Avery Woods on August 24, 1998, 1 week before the death of Willie James Williams.
Good evening. My name is Larry McDougall. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the incident that happened August the 24th. With inmate that we had at the Lowndes County Jail. His name was Adrian Woods. It was about 5:30 in the morning. I was in the process of feeding. We got a call from dispatch. Said they had someone just assaulted the sheriff. Okay? We told us to lock the jail down and everybody meet up at the salad port. When I got to the salad port, there was 3 white male officers that was putting on the black gloves. And I knew that what that was going to be. A few minutes later, the car pulled up. It pulled up in the salad port. The supervisor of that shift went up to the back door, snatched the door open, and drug Adrian Woods out the back seat. I slammed him to the ground. He was handcuffed behind the back. He had leg irons on. And once he hit the ground, 3 other officers jumped on him. They had one on the right side, was kneeing him in the side. They had one on the left, hit him in the side. They had one behind him, hit him in the butt. And they had one at the head, which was the supervisor, slapping him in his head. And they beat him there for a while. They picked him up and they dragged him into the salad port. When they threw him back down, they repeated the same thing. And he said, at this time, Mr. Wood didn't resist. He didn't make no motion to fight back or anything. He was handcuffed from behind. He said, well, let me take these handcuffs off and see, do we have any more fights out there? He wasn't fighting in the beginning. So they took the handcuffs off him, they slammed him up against the wall. He was on the wall like a fly, spraying eagles. Supervisor, he was the sergeant, supervisor of the ship. He reached from behind, grabbed his private area, and went and pulled it and twisted it. And when he turned loose, Mr. Woods said a cuss word. Supervisor of the ship returned, grabbed his groin area again, and went to pull it and twist it. And he said, take him down to the hole. So they grabbed him up, had his arm bite in the upward position, like his shoulder blade was about to touch. Had his arm bent back so far. So as they were taking him down the hallway, they had two metal gates, and we have a glass door. They got about 2 or 3 feet from that glass door, and they took off running, and Mr. Woods' head hit that glass head on. The glass shattered, the whole glass shattered. He fell out. I said, oh, Lord. I thought the man was dead.
Sheriff Polk refuted McDougal's charge.
When Avery Woods came into the jail, Avery Woods cracked 3 of my ribs early that morning. He assaulted me. Avery Woods came into the jail escorted by a black sergeant. Avery Woods is a black man. Avery Woods came in and wound up assaulting John Dixon. Larry McDougal stood there and failed to assist. He's a sworn peace officer. If John Dixon was beating Avery Woods, he violated his oath of office by not helping him. If Avery Woods was beating John Dixon, he violated by not assisting that officer. And then it went on your street talk, your Lake Park Post, all these reliable sources that y'all have gotten. Went on to say that Avery Woods was taken down the hall and his head rammed through a glass. You heard that, haven't you? Okay. Avery Woods had about as much hair as I've got. And if you can ram my head through that glass and not get a scratch on me, that's a pretty neat trick. Avery Woods did run down the hall, broke loose from him, and he did break the glass with his elbow.
A jail booking tape was produced, but all of the action takes place out of camera range. What scenes accompany the shouts and other noises on the tape can only be guessed at. Sheriff Polk also steadfastly denied that wrongdoing had occurred in the other cases, and he categorically rejected the accusation that justice was dispensed arbitrarily in Lowndes County.
My oath of office, the last 4 words, so help me God. That's a pretty serious oath, isn't it? See, I have no problem with convicting anybody. I'll send my mother to jail if she broke the law. And a lot of people realize I sent 2 deputies to federal prison last year.
In fact, Polk was honored as Sheriff of the Year by the Georgia Sheriff's Association in August of 1998, just days before the death of Willie James Williams. According to press reports, he was cited for his charitable contributions to the Georgia Sheriff's Boys Ranch and for his department's drug interdiction program, which had generated 97% of his office's budget the preceding year by way of revenue from drug seizures. The vice president of the Sheriff's Association called him one of the most progressive, professional sheriffs in the entire Southeast. Yet for every positive word about his administration, there were troubling testimonies about draconian jail conditions, ad hoc criminal procedure, and cronyism. Al Parsons is the editor of the Lake Park Post.
That is really a hellhole. And they have what they call an X team. They're kind of a goon squad that goes around and they call it Peter rolling. They just beat the hell out of people. And they do it because they're one, recalcitrant and noisy, or because they're told to. Either by like Leroy Smith or perhaps Kenneth Cooper. Certainly you've got to throw the sheriff in there too.
Linda Lewis is a former prisoner of the Lowndes County Jail who, by her own admission, was in and out of jail during one 4-year period.
They made a believer out of me. I'm a believer. I do not want to go back. I'd rather die and go to hell or die and go to heaven. But I do not want to go back in that place. And it's freezing in there. That's the only place that's cold in the county.
Medical?
That's right. You could be up there with pneumonia. It's still going to be freezing up there. You can ask for cover. You is not going to get it. They'll tell you make do with what you got. Breakfast time, you get some old watered down ass grits. Lunchtime, you get 2 damn sandwiches, which they're going to stand to the damn door and throw them through the rails to you. If you catch them, you catch them. If you don't, you just got to pick it up and eat it if you want it. Usually the guard that come and get you for medical, this is the way she come and get you. Y'all bitches better get up if you got to go to medical. I ain't waiting around here all damn day long on y'all motherfuckers. If you wasn't in here, you wouldn't have to do all this shit. And I'd be elsewhere. I could do whatever the fuck I want to do. Y'all bitches better come on. That's where they come and get you. When I first went in and booking one time, it was this girl, Officer Sherman, might I add. She kicked the shit out of me. And the reason why she kicked me, because I went to the door and asked for a spoon. There was an old lady in there. And she said, honey, she said, why did you kick her? She said, you're not supposed to put your feet on nobody. She said, that lady's not an animal.
If an inmate has a complaint, we have grievance forms that are numbered. So, you know, we can check the numbers, you know, make sure somebody doesn't destroy one. If an inmate makes a complaint on somebody, he can't destroy it. So, I mean, they have access to that.
They give you a grievance form for an officer. You don't hear nothing. You don't hear nothing. I talked to Captain Cooper about Officer Sermon kicking me. He wrote it down on a piece of paper. I have heard nothing else. Ain't no win. Whatever they
They'll beat you up, they'll beat you up,
ass.
and won't let you get visitation. They'll tell your people you sick.
As far as sanitary napkins and all that, y'all need pads? Yeah, we need pads. They throw them to you. Just like the food. You line up in a circle, one guard stands. If you catch it, you catch it. If you hit the floor, you hit the floor.
What kind of like disposal they have for that? What is
Ain't
it
no
like?
damn disposal.
You see how I look?
When you get through with it, you whatever. Ain't no damn disposal.
Good question. Because at one point, there wasn't nowhere to dispose of them napkins. And somebody flushed, it was flushing theirs. The whole side, 5, 6, 7, 8, all those cells over flooded. They had sanitary napkins floating around this high off the floor with water, shit, piss, urine, throw up, everything. They had it. Do you know they fed us in that shit? We had to eat around that shit. I'm talking about the shit you made yesterday floating around in your damn face. They wanted us to pick this shit up out of this water so they could drain it. They wanted us to pick this shit up with buckets. And I refused it. But there's something need to be done.
Somebody need to get in there and talk to them people in there so they can do something about that call.
They need to get somebody that's
In
over
there.
Captain Cooper and over Ashley Paul into that jail.
It bears mentioning that the Lowndes County Jail is not meant to house hardened criminals. Again, editor Al Parsons.
People are in there mainly in there for misdemeanors. They're not, most of these people are not bank robbers, murderers, and so on. And most of them will be bonded out. And the ones that aren't bonded out are in there because they're poor. And they have to await trial sometimes a year before they are tried, which is crazy. You know, your speedy justice by your peers is a constitutional guarantee, but it doesn't work here.
What happens, however, when you lock people away and continue to degrade them? To salvage their dignity, they may withhold cooperation. They often talk back even though they know that punishment is a certainty. Fear can turn to hatred. Simple charges are liable to turn into something more serious. Far from rehabilitating, prisons become the breeding grounds of criminality. LaShonda Anderson is another woman who knows what it's like on the inside of the Lowndes County Jail.
Because I remember one time when I went in, I was like 7 months pregnant. And the police or whoever he was, the sheriff that was arresting me, he treated me real bad. I'm talking about he's like pulling on me and talking to me like he my daddy or somebody. Here I am pregnant. No, I'm already sensitive because I'm pregnant. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And when I got in there, I messed around and got sick. Don't never get sick out there. Don't get sick. Talking about taking you to medical. I'm in there 3 days. I ain't getting no medical attention for 3 days while I'm in there. And I want to know what a stomach cramp. They didn't check to see was my baby still living. They didn't check my blood pressure. They didn't check my vitals. They didn't check none of that. When they took me in there, I gave them a little bit of information and they put me in their room. That lady told me a doctor will be with me in a minute. I ain't seen nobody for 3 days. On the time
I would not sit up here and lie to you. Everything I said this day is a fact. I've been there, done that, went through this. Yes, ma'am.
Miss Lewis, it seems, was indeed telling the truth. At the time of her imprisonment, the Lowndes County Jail was being sued in U.S. District Court for violating the 1st, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States. The class action was brought by 4 Lowndes County Jail inmates, whose lead plaintiff was Dorothea Patterson. In their complaint, Patterson et al. Charged that the county was in violation of the Constitution by reason of overcrowding, racial segregation, inadequate ventilation and sanitation, insufficient recreation and physical exercise, inadequate medical, dental, and mental health care, inadequate mental screening of inmates on arrival, inadequate access to legal materials and professional legal assistance, and understaffing. The case was settled before going to trial. Judge Hugh Lawson's 19-page ruling ordered some 60 procedural changes in how the jail was to operate. Henceforth, the jail would have to restrict the number of inmates to no more than 606. Every inmate would be given a bed, mattress, and blanket. The jail would have to be run in a racially neutral manner, and jail staff were ordered to refrain from using racial epithets. Medical protocols were to be stepped up in numerous ways. Inmates were to be granted access to legal materials. They were also to be allowed 3 hours of exercise per week. Additional changes were ordered as well. Jail personnel were to refrain from opening prisoners' incoming and outgoing mail. Weekly visits for family and friends were to be instituted. Ventilation and sanitation in the cell blocks were to be improved. The jail commissary was ordered to offer a variety of personal care items and snacks at nominal markup, and prison staffing was to be substantially augmented to ensure the safe and secure operation of the jail. By September of 1998, appalling tales of the county jail had become legion. So when Valdosta's African-American citizens awoke on September 4th to see this photograph of Willie James Williams on the front page of the local newspaper, there was outrage in the black community. Community leaders quickly organized a protest, and on Saturday, September 19th, 1998, approximately 1,500 people, mostly African American, assembled on South Lee Street, the site of Willie James Williams's arrest, for a peaceful march to the Lowndes County Jail. At public demonstrations like this one, and at church gatherings, speaker after speaker demanded the resignation of Sheriff Ashley Polk. It was a moment of daring and unity, truly a heady time. Many people wanted to be on the podium. Even the politicians were eager to get involved.
This morning when I picked up the paper and looked at the front page, the first thing I saw was my sister, Elsie Napier. And there was something really moving about the shirt that she had on because it said, "Pride is back." When you look out into the audience and see those of you standing and the house packed, I can assure you that pride is indeed back.
Certainly happy to be here and be a part of this movement. I'm really looking forward. I have never been proud to call myself a Valdosta as I was on yesterday to see the crowd continue.
This happened a block from my house. It could have been my child, it could have been your child that witnessed it. I could have been the Williams, it could have been my brother, it could have been you, your brother, your sister, and anyone else. That's right. We want justice. Thank you.
We have a movement in Valdosta. We hadn't had a movement like this since the BCAG days. And we're going to clean up the jailhouse, the city hall, the county.
An early strategy was to try to force concessions on public accountability through economic pressure. The strategy, as described here by community leader Alma Williams, was termed cooperative reciprocity. Local merchants were advised that those not supporting the cause would lose black patronage.
And I just have a problem with us giving our money to us and us don't support us.
Amen.
At this time, I would like the rest of us who have a business to stand up.
All right. All right. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
That tomorrow when we go shopping, remember the names of the people who are here supporting us.
Amen.
And freedom comes with economics. It goes hand in hand. Until we start managing our economics, we'll never be free. So people, those people who stood up, you need to support.
When you learn the truth about economics, you will be free from economic exploitation. You will trust your own business people. You will patronize them, but we will also insist that they tell us the truth. We will insist that they do quality work. We're going to support people who support this movement. We are going to support people that support this movement. We are going to support people that support us. Money that is spent by us must come back to us through increased employment of us.
Then we're going to meet with the movers and shakers, the business community.
All right.
And if they can't get him out, they ain't going to get us in.
Soon word came along that the Columbus branch of Johnny Cochran's law firm was going to take up the cause of Avery Woods and Larry McDougall and Willie James Williams. The firm would be represented by attorney Joe Wiley.
I was sitting there
yesterday in my home and the phone rang. And the man said on the other end, "This is Attorney Joe Wiley." I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm calling from Johnny Cochran's office."
I feel something about being here in Valdosta tonight. Cochrane called me and asked me if Valdosta was ready to fight. I told him, brother, if you want to see a community that's ready to stand up, you need to see this community. There's been a lot of things in the past that should have been addressed. And as of last week, they issued letters saying that they did, in fact, find discrimination. One of the things that we had to figure out is, where do we start? All right. And we said, give us Larry and give us Avery, and we think we can do something with that.
Leaders spoke confidently.
I don't play with God. I don't play with black people. And I ain't scared of white folks.
Some people probably term me a little radical. I never had a problem really saying what needed to be said.
But white folks always tell me that, and when it gets to something like this, what we need, Lord, it's cooperation. But they want me to do all the coin, but they do all the operating. So he ought to at least have credibility in the black community. He doesn't have it. And since he doesn't have it, Ashley Park has to go. Ashley Park has to go. Come on. Ashley Park has to go. 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 Ashley Park.
And the crowd loved it. Sheriff Polk, meanwhile, continued to insist that nothing untoward had occurred. He chided the black community for wanting it both ways.
Enforcement? Do they want us to quit enforcing the law? I mean, just because things like this happen. Same people always want the dope off the street. Alma Williams lives in that area where this happened. She's always been a big complaint about enforcing the law and getting the dope and the drunks.
Reflecting on the case some months later, Lowndes County District Attorney David Miller echoed Polk's frustration.
If you're a politician, whether you're an elected sheriff of one of Georgia's 159 counties, or whether you're a police chief who is answerable to a city council who's elected by voters, if you've got people in your community who are screaming to you about the drug dealing that's going out openly in the streets in their neighborhood, you're going to respond to those people first. And I don't see anything wrong with that. If you've got limited resources, and when they call and say, you know, y'all do something about these things, there you only got so many police officers, you only got so much court time. You've got to allocate your resources to where you can get the biggest bang for your buck.
Through the uproar, Sheriff Polk's office was sticking to Deputy Kevin Farmer's version of events, that Williams struggled and kicked, and in so doing fell to the pavement. Upon getting up, he continued to resist, whereupon Farmer said that he placed Williams on the ground and waited for backup.
If I felt like it was one out of evidence saying that man was beat, you know, and I had something to go on, then a lot easier for me to take Kevin and convict him or fire him or something, you know, and I would have him march. You've got to stand by a man if you think he's right until he's proven wrong.
What you are viewing now is video taken by the camera in Deputy Farmer's vehicle. It shows Farmer handcuffing Williams.
Hold on. Put your arm back here.
Note that Williams neither struggles nor kicks. He does not resist, nor, however, does he cooperate.
Get the city and route to me down here. The car's sitting there running. Give me another unit down here. Get in the car. Now you done did it.
Help arrives in the person of Corporal Jimmy Blanton. The footage now being shown was captured by the camera in his vehicle. As Blanton approaches, you can see Farmer leading Williams to his car. Williams goes to the ground. Is Deputy Farmer's flashlight being used to strike Mr. Williams on the head? Or is it merely swinging from its attachment on Deputy Farmer's belt? This is a major point of contention. One side insists that Williams was bludgeoned, that there were oval wounds on his skull consistent with the shape of a flashlight. The other side rejects that contention, saying that Deputy Farmer's flashlight never left his belt.
The tape does not show him beating, and nor do the 3 eyewitnesses. Nobody wants to talk about eyewitnesses.
This is not entirely accurate. For one thing, there were more than 3 eyewitnesses that night. For another, 3 of them subsequently testified that they witnessed excessive and unnecessary force. In fact, at least 7 people witnessed at least some of the events that transpired between Deputy Farmer and Willie James Williams. For unknown reasons, only 4 were asked to testify at the coroner's inquest. The first, Mr. Jeremiah Allen, was actually in the car with Williams that night. Oddly, however, he testified that he did not know what took place between Deputy Farmer and Mr. Williams. "I don't know," he said. "I didn't see. I don't know." Friends would later say that Allen was fearful of testifying. He would not speak to us.
Jeremiah with him, but Jeremiah scared as hell.
Is he the guy that was in the car with him?
Yeah, Jeremiah.
The second eyewitness, Dr. Joyce Joyce, testified that she saw Officer Farmer slam Williams to the ground.
Officer Farmer put his leg out and very aggressively and violently flipped Mr. Williams on the pavement.
And that afterward, she observed between a pint and a quart of blood on the spot. Eyewitnesses Kelvin Reed and Jimmy Denson gave similar testimony. Reed: "I saw a man getting arrested by the police. He was already in handcuffs. I seen the cop take him in the back of the car and slam him to the pavement. He wasn't fighting back or anything. Another police car was coming up, and the cop took his foot and put it behind the guy and slammed him down again the second time." Jimmy Denson had been sitting on his porch that night. He watched Farmer stop Williams and put handcuffs on him. He heard Williams refuse to get into the squad car.
Get in the car. Now you done did it. You know what you done did, though.
And testified. So after he refused to get in the car, Officer Farmer slung Mr. Williams down in the road. He picked Mr. Williams back up and asked Mr. Williams again. He said, "Get in the car." So Mr. Williams wouldn't get in the car. So he slung Mr. Williams down again in the road. By this time, he done bust Mr. Williams's face, and he started bleeding pretty bad. Other witnesses were never asked for their testimony. One was Miss Alverma Gilmore, the woman in whose home Willie James Williams resided at the time of his death. She spoke to Williams the night of his arrest.
Jeremiah come right here.
Jeremiah was
He was in the car with him. Jeremiah come here. But anyhow, he said James was going to the hospital. He had a seizure. I know he do have them. And I went there to my phone and I called out to the hospital. I said, you got a Willie James Williams out there? She said, yeah. I said, did he have a seizure? She said, no. I said, can I talk to him? He said, if she can talk. And then after she gave him the phone, he was telling her how they beat him up. So y'all ought to see me with my lip about tore off. They hit me in the head with a flashlight and said, stomped me, beat me, broke my arm, my leg. We got cut off. I couldn't get him back no more. And I tried 3 times, but last time I did call, they said he was gone. He didn't sound like himself. He couldn't talk out of his mouth good.
Did he sound frightened to you?
No, he just telling me how they done beat him up. They said, everyone said y'all ought to come see. That next morning, wasn't it? It was the next morning or the morning after that?
Morning after that.
They called me from the county in there and said Willie James was dead. I went to Holland. I called him and told his brother and Brittany, I said, Jane dead. But then none of them get a chance to see him before they send him off.
Who can document he told her that beside her?
Besides her, I don't know. She's an elderly
Has
lady.
anybody even asked the hospital if he got any phone calls? I don't believe he got any phone calls.
I don't know. I haven't talked to them.
I don't think he got any phone calls. I've never heard of him getting a phone call. And back to the 3 eyewitnesses, you know. Why would 3 people see it one way and then one lady who can't back up anything, you don't believe her?
Well,
Miss Gilmore's testimony of Willie James Williams's description of events matches that of another witness, Mr. Stephen Moore, the on-duty nurse in the emergency room in the early morning hours of September 1st, 1998. Well, I was like I would normally do with any patient. I just walked in there and asked him, how did he fall, you know, because I was assuming he fell, looking at his mouth and all, and he said he didn't fall. And then I asked him some other questions, and then I just asked him again. He made sure he told me that he did not fall, that they pushed him down, that he was knocked to the ground. He made sure he told me that more than probably 3 or 4 times at least. It also matches nearly word for word that of Mr. Ricky Lane, the man with whom Williams shared his jail cell the last night of his life. Lane told the Lake Park Post about the conversation he had with Williams. Post editor Al Parsons.
But on September the 3rd, I talked to this guy. He just got out of jail. He had talked to Willie in the jail before he died. Now here it is. Man dies in Lowndes County Jail after a beating. This is September the 4th, 1998. A fellow inmate told the Post he saw Williams after he'd come back from the hospital, and it looked as if he had been severely beaten. I couldn't understand him. He could hardly talk. I had to get real close to him. His lips were so swollen, and the right side of his head. He said they pushed me down, they beat me up, they did this to me. He had trouble walking. He was stiff, like it hurt. And the runaround said he needed to go to the MO, which is like the sick bay, because he kept peeing in his pants. His arm was in a sling, and he had about 1 inch of gauze under his chin. Now, I know the man, and he never had any trouble going to the bathroom before.
Lane told Williams's friend, Miss Rosa Green, the same story.
I spoke with him, and he told me what happened. He told me what condition that he was in when they brought him in there, and that James said they did this to me. You know, he was telling Ricky that the cops beat him.
Well, what kind of things did Ricky Lane say?
He saw how James was bruised up. His face was all messed up. And he was urinating all over himself, you know. Like he didn't have any control over his blood or anything. He could hardly walk. He couldn't walk. He was just lying on the floor.
Perhaps Corporal Blanton's reaction upon arriving at the scene provides the best clue as to what may have happened.
And then Mr. Blanton, when he got out and he seen Farmer doing what he was doing, he asked him, "What have you done? What have you done?"
How do you know that?
We heard it.
Blanton testified to that?
No, we heard it on the tape.
Oh, you heard it on the
We
tape?
heard Blanton asking him, "What have you done?
Really?
What have you done?"
Williams's death was initially ruled a homicide by the Southwest Regional Medical Examiner, September 3, 1998. The specific cause of death, in the words of medical examiner Dr. Anthony Clark, was complications of blunt force head trauma. The full autopsy report enumerated scores of injuries that were documented on film. Dr. Ari Santis teaches philosophy and ethics at Valdosta State University and also serves as vice president of the People's Tribunal.
And what we have concluded is that Mr. Williams, contrary to the accounts that were given by local officials, Mr. Willie James Williams did not simply die as a result of falling down. Mr. Williams was beaten at least once. That is clear to us. That has been the driving force behind our movement on this issue.
Despite the homicide pronouncement, townspeople were admonished to be patient until toxicology reports and an investigation by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation were completed. This did not sit well with members of the black community, many of whom continued to meet in various churches in town.
A few months ago, the coroner said that they would have an inquest in early November. I picked up the paper on Saturday morning and was stunned to read where the coroner says he's got to wait before he releases the forensic evidence, the scientific evidence. He's got to wait until the G.B.R. has completed its investigation. He's got to wait until the FBI completes his investigation. I happen to know, and now you're going to know, that his investigation is completely separate and apart and independent. They're playing games with us. But you tell them for Florida Rose that we ain't playing.
The nascent movement was going strong. It had opened a bank account, elected a leader, and chosen a name for itself, the People's Tribunal.
So what we're going to do today is make a nomination, accept nominations from the floor for our leader. And I'm going to start it off since I have the mic. And I'm going to nominate Bro Rhodes.
I met with several of the ministers on Saturday and we talked about what this ought to be. And so it's going to be the People's Tribunal. The movement will belong to the people. It's going to be of the people. It's going to be by the people. It's going to be for the people, not Floyd Rose.
Meanwhile, one of the local newspapers, the Valdosta Daily Times, suggested on several occasions that alcoholism played a role in Mr. Williams's death. Williams, in fact, had had a few beers over the course of that evening. Jeremiah Allen testified to that at the coroner's inquest. Yet the toxicology exam performed on Williams's body did not indicate a presence of alcohol in his blood, a fact that puzzled the medical examiner. Nonetheless, a bias had already been put into the minds of the public, and many whites continued to assert that Williams's death was the result of his own drunkenness. The newspaper also printed the advice of Lowndes County Attorney Mr. Oris Blackburn, who went so far as to say to black leaders, "It's in your nature to be patient." What Attorney Blackburn apparently did not know was that there was a new leader in town by the name of Floyd Rose. He called for another march.
And we have been virtually ignored. And so we're going to walk again.
Reverend Rose was no stranger to the civil rights struggle. He told the story of traveling on a bus when he was a boy.
I was 11 years old, and the Simpson Street Church of Christ in Atlanta chartered a bus to Inslee, Alabama. Inslee is a suburb of Birmingham. And I was sitting next to an 82-year-old woman. This was in 1949 or 50. And as the bus rounded a curve and about to cross the Alabama line, she leaned over and said to me, "Son, I need to use the restroom." At that time, there were no restrooms on the buses. So I jumped out of my little seat and danced down the aisle and said to the white bus driver, there were no black bus drivers at that time with Greyhound or Trailways, and I said to the bus driver, "There's an old lady in the back who needs to use the restroom." So he stopped at the next service station on the right side of the road, and I thought he was going to get out and make the arrangements. He did not. So I jumped off the bus and went across the street to the service station, and there were 4 white men sitting at a card table playing cards in the middle of the old service station. And I knocked on the door and at the same time opened it. And one of them was a big guy who looked like he may have weighed 300 pounds, had a cigar hanging out the right side of his mouth. And I said, "Excuse me, there's an old woman on the bus who needs to use the restroom." And he slowly took the cigar out of his mouth, laid it on the card table, and looked at me and said, "We ain't got no nigger restrooms." I said, "But she's an old lady." And he just pushed back from that table, got up, walked around, opened the door, and put his big fat hand in the pit of my stomach and gave me one shove. And I landed against the gas pump, slid down, just ruined my little blue serge suit my mother had bought me for the trip. Grit, grind, dirt, and oil in it. And then I turned and I looked in the direction of that bus, and I saw 40 people staring out of their windows, their eyes frozen with fear. They said absolutely nothing. I got up. My body was hurt, but more importantly, my feelings were hurt. I got on the bus. Nobody said anything. And I sat down beside the lady only to hear her say that she had sewn her clothes. That's when I decided that I did not want to be like him, and I didn't want to be like them. I didn't want to make people afraid of me, and I would never again be afraid of people who made people afraid of them.
Protesters took to the streets a second time. This time they marched to Valdosta City Hall.
In the city of Lowndes County, I see a sheriff by the name of Ashley Polk. I hear the New Testament God saying, "Ashley Polk, don't play with me. Don't play with my children. Don't play with me."
Noticeably absent at the second march, however, was Alma Williams, one of the organizers of the first march. The wife of Valdosta City Councilman Bunnis Williams, Miss Williams had had a change of heart. She was quoted in the Valdosta Daily Times as saying, This thing has really gotten out of hand, and she was now urging people not to support Reverend Floyd Rose, who only days before she had nominated to lead the People's Tribunal. It was a surprising turn of events, and Miss Williams never elaborated on her cryptic remarks. Did white backlash against the boycott cause her to lose her nerve? It was no secret that she had political ambitions. Indeed, she would make a run for a seat on the Lowndes County Commission in the 2000 elections. She declined our request to be interviewed for this video. In any event, the man she had embraced just a few days earlier, she now repudiated. What had she meant when she said that things had gotten out of control? And why did she make her pronouncement while Rose was out of town?
You need to ask Alma because I don't know. I don't know why.
With no clarification offered, speculation ran wild. Had authorities pressured her husband, Bunnis Williams? The city councilman from District 1, along with his colleague, Willie Rayford of the 3rd District, was facing a felony charge of voter fraud. Both had been caught with voting ballots on their persons, a crime punishable by more than a year in prison and/or a fine. Yet Williams and Rayford were never criminally charged, though they were sanctioned by the Georgia Board of Elections. Was a quid pro quo in the works, as some people suggested? Lowndes County District Attorney David Miller explains why he did not prosecute Williams and Rayford. In so doing, he illustrates the discretion and the power of his office.
They technically violated that felony statute. There's no doubt in my mind that they did what was prohibited by that statute. But in every criminal case, you have to show criminal intent. And in that case, they said that they did not know that it was a prohibition for them to pick up absentee ballots from people in their neighborhood and drop them off at the post office. Technically, ignorance of the law was no excuse, okay? They testified both in the hearing in Atlanta and in their statements that they did not know that it was against the law, that they would not do it again, and they were sorry, and that they had admitted that they had done it. Now, they were punished at the state level, and they were given a fine, an administrative fine. I don't remember how much it was. Seems like it was in the neighborhood of $500 or so.
Both of them knew better, because it had been a pattern that had been practiced and caught out more or less. The reason I think they weren't prosecuted in the grand jury system was because David Miller needs that black vote if he's going to get reelected, and they represent a very big hunk of that black vote. Lowndes County is about between 35 and 38% black. It's a good hunk of the population. And what they're doing by not prosecuting black politicians is trying to ingratiate themselves with the black population. Certainly, Alma Williams is the wife of Bunnis Williams. So if you let one of them go, then you might find some dissent against Floyd Rose on the other hand, because Alma did bail out on Floyd Rose and said that he'd gone too far and was trying to say he was an extremist and so on, which is absolute nonsense.
I would have absolutely no knowledge that there would be any connection. I certainly never had any conversation with Bunnis or Alma about that. What if she dropped out of that organization? I assume she has her own reasons why she did that, and it could very well be philosophical differences as opposed to something related to her husband's investigation.
Suddenly there were cracks in the movement. Most notably, black preachers lined up against Reverend Floyd Rose. Reverend Rose was expelled from the Church of Christ on charges of denominationalism.
But here is the letter. Dear Brother Rose, you have been admonished on several occasions that your practice of inviting denominational preachers to read scripture lead prayer and preach in assemblies of the Church of Christ is contrary to sound doctrine and the traditions which we have received. We have no choice but to mark you and to withdraw fellowship from you. This action is effective immediately and will continue in...
The rumor mill got energized. Various conspiracy theories were put forth. One in particular had it that Valdosta was controlled by a good old boy network, which included, among others, the sheriff, a couple of judges, a few captains of industry, and the district attorney. Again, Valdosta State University historian David Williams.
Well, I think the local power structure, like power structures everywhere, revolve around economics. Those who have the money, seem to me at least to have a greater influence on local governing boards.
The political powers in Valdosta or any community are tied to whatever the majority culture is. And in Valdosta, the majority culture is a white culture. Mm-hmm. It is a privileged culture. It is a powerful culture.
John Rosar is a longtime resident and frequent critic of Lowndes County politics.
This is a family town. It's a company town. It's a good old boy town. And it doesn't take long for you to find out who it is that runs the town.
Editor Al Parsons.
And the way that works is this way. J. David Miller is the district attorney. He prosecutes the cases that are presented to him by the sheriff. Well, the sheriff doesn't want his department with a bigger black eye than it already has. So Miller, who is, according to another lawyer, deeply indebted to Paul, it is literally becomes the defense attorney for the sheriff's department.
You know, I'm certainly familiar with the source of what you're quoting, but that's the same type of newspaper who puts in their allegations from unnamed sources and unidentified former deputies, just as an example of the type of lies.
Reporter Charles Moore of the Lake Park Post.
Well, the network controls the resources. If Sheriff Polk arrests people, David Miller prosecutes them in Judge McLean's court. Judge McLean was brought into, as I said, was brought into the political arena by Billy Langdale back in the 60s. Sheriff Polk buys all of his cars for the sheriff's department from Langdale. So Langdale, Miller, and Polk are all part of the good old boy network.
Lies. If you want to talk about that newspaper for a moment, that newspaper likes to put in their paper regularly, I'm told, that the sheriff has loaned me $50,000. The sheriff has never loaned me 50 cents for a drink, much less $50,000. I'm not stupid enough to take a personal loan from somebody in the criminal justice system, much less a sheriff. That's just an outright lie.
Well, here's a good example. We have the Chief Justice in the Superior Court system for this area is H. Arthur McLean. Now, I'm not knocking his judicial abilities, I'm just telling you how he got there. He had an uncle who was on the county commission after he got out of college. And another person, at that time the county commission had 3 people on it. 2 of those people, one was his uncle, another one was Billy Langdale. Well, when he got out of school, his uncle and Billy Langdale made him the county attorney, and then eventually he became county judge and Superior Court judge. Here's the interesting thing. Polk buys strictly from Langdale, like there are no other, Ford dealerships in America. Millions of dollars he buys from Langdale.
Now, this debt that you're talking about, you mentioned a car.
Is that all it is? I mean, David Miller must make enough money so that he can
Well,
afford his own
I think he
cars,
makes
and-
$80,000, but I think he makes enough money to buy a Toyota or two. But this is, to me, is a conflict of interest. You don't give cars to people that might have to prosecute you. And if you might have to prosecute the sheriff, you don't accept the car from the sheriff. You don't accept his money, his largesse, or anything from him.
I drive a 1993 Crown Vic with close to 90,000 miles on it. That vehicle was purchased by our office with proceeds from drug seizure assets. We are allocated 10% by the Superior Court judges of asset forfeitures. I bought a 1993 Crown Vic, which I drive all over the circuit. I also have a 1993 Crown Vic that I bought for my chief assistant who lives in Thomasville, who drives all over the circuit. The sheriff did donate to my office one 1995 Crown Vic that has about 150,000 miles on it. My senior assistant does drive that vehicle.
The sheriff is handing out cars like they're bubblegum wrappers, and they're supposed to be going for law enforcement, and they're going to build a political dynasty.
So you're saying that the sheriff has never extended to you a loan?
Absolutely not. And you're the first person who's ever come in and asked me that question. The person who likes to write this in his newspaper regularly has never called to ask about that. And because, well, I'll leave it to other people to decide why he's never called to ask about that.
I like to use the analogy that they're all feeding at the trough, at the hog trough. They're all like pigs squirming to get at the trough. And they cannot get at the trough unless they are there. If they leave the trough to do something about the social issues, the real problems, then they can't get it in the slop. They're more interested in slop and wallowing in the mud than they are helping people.
That's what is, and it's so difficult to fight because who is overseeing what's going on other than the district attorney and the sheriff in this area? No one.
But I want you to know from a public servant standpoint, and I've been doing this since 1985, public servants generally are not paid comparably to what they could get if they went out in the private sector and just wanted to make money. And some of us do it because we believe in what we're doing and we believe we can make a difference. And it is, quite frankly, very offensive to me to be accused by people of being a racist. It still hurts when you come to work every day, and again, most of what I do is serving the black community, and I don't think people really realize that.
Is it all just lies then, as District Attorney Miller protests? One man who can testify that something is indeed amiss in Lowndes County is John Rosar. Rosar makes no secret of the fact that he is after Sheriff Polk's job. When, however, in 1997, he charged that Sheriff Polk was using prison labor for personal ends, he suddenly found himself in a personal and legal maelstrom.
What had happened was, in the grand jury, a prisoner who was not a prisoner anymore testified to the grand jury that he had worked on Sheriff Ashley Polk's property. There was a G.B.R. agent named Tom Choate. He also interviewed a deputy sheriff from Lowndes County Sheriff's Department. His name was Christopher Titus Williams, and he stated he took prisoners to Ashley Polk's farm on many different occasions in both Lowndes and Barron County.
The allegation appeared in the Lake Park Post in an article Rosar helped write. In it, the Post asserted that Sheriff Polk had used prisoners to clean up and polish the drives and lawns of his farm. Polk was facing a possible misdemeanor charge. State law prohibits sheriffs from using inmate labor for private gain. But it all backfired on Rosar when GBI investigator Russell Mansfield was unable to confirm his story. Several of the people Mansfield interviewed could not recall anything incriminating. One man who did make a statement was deemed unreliable when he could not provide accurate details of the sheriff's farm. Rosar was then indicted for perjury and was facing a sentence of 1 to 10 years in prison and/or a fine of $10,000. As the trial was about to get underway, the assistant district attorney offered to reduce the charge to a misdemeanor for filing a false report. Unable to pay any more legal fees, Rosar accepted the plea. He was fined $1,000 and sentenced to 12 months probation. Legal difficulties weren't the only problems facing Rosar. He alleges that the sheriff waged a campaign of intimidation against him.
My house was being riddled with bullets. When I was being thrown in jail, when I was being investigated by the sheriff over and over repeatedly.
On another occasion, Rosar says that the sheriff stalked him.
Till the morning that me and my son were leaving early, it was around 6 o'clock, the sheriff was out there in my truck. And so I filed charges against the sheriff with the Valdosta Police Department for stalking. The sheriff says he wasn't there, and that's the end of it.
Still, Rosar did not back down. In the spring of 2000, however, as he prepared to launch his campaign for Polk's job, the Lowndes County attorney, Jim Elliott, lodged a complaint against Rosar with the county elections officials. The charge was moral turpitude. It stemmed from Rosar's misdemeanor conviction of filing a false complaint in the Polk matter.
Call and say, well, what's moral turpitude? Today, I still don't understand what moral turpitude is. The best thing I can tell you is moral turpitude is anything that they want it to be.
Rosar was summarily disqualified from running for sheriff.
The establishment keeps control of town because they use only lawyers and doctors and judges and their wives and CPA firms and bank presidents and vice presidents who sit in judgment amongst all of us. If you're one of the good old boys and you go before the grand jury and they want you, don't want you in trouble, you won't be in trouble. If they want you out of the picture because something you've done or whatever, you go before the grand jury, you're going down.
Another Valdostan who asserts the existence of a good old boy network in Lowndes County is Vicki English, an investigative reporter for the Valdosta Daily Times, the area's leading daily newspaper. Prior to becoming a journalist, Ms. English was a police officer in Jacksonville, Florida.
Have got my hands on a copy of the Coroner's Inquest.
Did Exum provide that for you?
Absolutely not. In fact, he went to great lengths to keep it from me.
How so?
When I put in a simple open records request through the county clerk's office, the next thing I knew, although I was out on the street, Mr. Exum personally came down to the newspaper with a hand-typed message explaining to me why I couldn't have this. It was simply a way of impeding me getting to the truth. He even came in and spoke to my editor, whose response in turn to me was very hostile. And I understand now why they didn't want me to see it.
Tell me.
I could start with Kevin Farmer's testimony. It doesn't add up. As a police officer, it doesn't add up.
Is there a good old boy network?
Incredibly ingrained. I wonder if it ever can be dislodged. Sheriff Polk's reach goes very far. He's not a man you want to make mad in this county, and he's proven it to me. He has virtually shut down my access to information in this town in terms of investigative report. I believe the district attorney's office, the police department to a very large degree, the coroner without question.
G.B.R.
Yes. Fear. This town has a climate of fear. Definitely.
Fear. Fear of the authorities was a topic that came up again and again in the making of this video. One can argue that there is a chorus of fear among ordinary Valdostans when it comes to matters of pursuing justice.
The white community, after the Civil War, was afraid of the African American community. It was afraid of what it called spreading niggerism. It was afraid of what the paper called mongrellism.
It disturbs me that so many black folk are afraid. You talk to them. When we were, during the election, when we were out there working and holding up signs, I was stunned at the number of blacks who seemed so afraid to even look at the signs. When we were displaying the pictures of Willie James Williams, they were almost, I don't know, they were just scared to look at it, you know?
Somebody has to speak up for the people that can't speak for themselves because they're afraid, you know. And I'm saying that being in the jury room and looking back and you saw the sheriff standing at the door, you know, that's supposed to be intimidation.
Have you ever spoken to Jeremiah, the man in the car with him, about the events that happened that night?
Yes. The same day that it happened, I went over there and I spoke with him, and he tells me that he didn't see anything. You know, he don't know what happened. I think he's just afraid to talk.
Why do white majority, powerful white people not participate in this? There is little advantage economically, politically, or personally for people to stand up and not go along with the way things are run. There's no advantage. In fact, there's tremendous disenfranchisement that comes with people who will take a stand.
And let me say something about the preachers. In my opinion, the preachers are a lot of hypocrites. You know, can hide behind what they call the cloak of Christianity, but these folk care nothing about what's right. They only care about what's expedient, meaning they will do only that which is pragmatic. To get along means to keep quiet, to remain silent. They are fearful, and I use that word again, they are afraid that if they get off their knees and start praying and stand up, someone may see them doing the right thing. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of doing the right thing.
If you can control who gets the jobs, it's a hell of an economic factor, because government is probably the biggest employer in this area, or in a lot of areas. And if you can hire people and give them good jobs, even the guards out at the Lowndes County Prison, that's a pretty good job. And when you start firing 16 black guards, it's an impact on the black community.
Most of the people, like you say, like I say, they still living like that. They're scared of, if I go out and march, such and such gonna happen to me, I'm gonna lose my job, or I'm gonna make my boss mad, or if I go out and march. I've heard some of them say, you know, Paul, he's got power. He know who's doing and who's not.
Oh man, we done received threats. We done received, we had to change our phone numbers. They gave my mom a hard time on the job, trying to make her quit, everything. You know, it's just so much going on in our community. You know, people don't come around like they used to. I was on the job I was working at Mazda Flood Company, and we was doing the courthouse up here. And there was some electrical work going on, and Ashley Park was the contractor over the electrical part. And he said that he didn't want me at the courthouse.
Whether Alma Williams split the movement, or whether through fear or apathy, attendance at People's Tribunal meetings leveled off. Only the truly committed remained. But if it was smaller, it was also more diverse, attracting people of various races and religious backgrounds.
To the citizens of Lowndes County from the People's Tribunal. The People's Tribunal, in realizing that we have allowed others to define to the community who they think we are and what they think our agenda is, wishes to state clearly for the record our mission statement, who we really are, and our agenda. Who are we? We are your neighbors from various areas of the county and many walks of life. Business owners, homemakers, teachers, professors, entrepreneurs, employees of various organizations, and retired persons, both military and civilian. We are an organization inclusive of all racial groups and religious beliefs.
Throughout the fall of 1998, passions continued to intensify, and Valdostans, north and south, awaited the coroner's inquest, hoping, if not for vindication, at least for some sort of resolution. The People's Tribunal marched yet again, this time to the Valdosta Chamber of Commerce. The coroner's inquest was finally set for December 2nd, exactly 3 months after the death of Willie James Williams. The quasi-court proceeding, as District Attorney David Miller termed it, was held in the Lowndes County Courthouse and presided over by Coroner Charles Exum. His charge was to review all of the evidence gathered to date in front of 5 jurors and the public.
Again, anytime somebody dies while in custody, there's going to be interest in the community as to what went on. Often we will have an inquest when something like that happens so that the public knows. And the reason we do that is because what goes on in grand jury by law is secret. The community can't see what's happening in the grand jury. On the other hand, when you go to a trial or if you have an inquest, that's an open court proceeding. The inquest was held prior to any grand jury proceeding so that it could be aired out in an open manner, so that the public could be there, so that the press could be there and hear what happened in the case.
The main courtroom of the Lowndes County Courthouse was filled to capacity. The coroner admonished the crowd to be orderly. The jury had been selected from a grand jury list, a procedure with which some people in town took issue in the aftermath of the inquest. The district attorney later defended the process.
I often read people complain and say it's the same people over and over. The current grand jury that we have serving right now, I asked them at the beginning of their service, how many of y'all have ever served on grand jury before? Not a single hand went up. So the concept that it's the same people serving over and over making the decisions, that's a misconception. There may be 1 or 2 people who have served on a grand jury before, but you know, it's certainly not the same old crew coming in each year or each term. That's just a fallacy that somebody's wanting to promote.
And what are the criteria for being selected in the grand jury?
They're supposed to be chosen by the jury commissioners from the most intelligent and upright citizens of the community.
Shouldn't every registered voter be on that list?
Okay, that's not state law. And just because you're a registered voter doesn't mean that you're the most upright, intelligent people in the community. That's what the state legislature has said you will choose your grand jurors from.
The judiciary here, in my opinion, is pathetic.
In any event, a jury was seated. It consisted of 3 whites and 2 blacks, with a black alternate. We spoke to 3 of the jurors. Each recalled the anguish of the experience in vivid detail. Juror Delois Bivens.
It was an experience that I never thought that I would feel, to see. You know, you hear of injustice, but to see it firsthand and know that things are done wrong when you're a part of it, it just took a toll on me.
Stuart Mullis was the jury foreman.
To this date, other than the death of some family members, it was the worst experience that I've ever been through, and a hugely learning experience in a lot of ways. I was scared that certainly that we heard all the evidence. I was scared that we as a group, everybody made the right call.
Jurors heard testimony from 30 witnesses over 8 hours. The principal witnesses were Sheriff's Deputy Kevin Farmer, the arresting officer, Dr. Jonathan Paarents, the emergency room physician who treated Mr. Williams, GBI agent Russell Mansfield, and Dr. Anthony Clark, the medical examiner, who performed the autopsy on the deceased Mr. Williams. It was Dr. Clark who made the pronouncement of homicide as the cause of death 3 months earlier. The first to take the stand, Farmer testified that he first noticed Williams driving erratically on Lee Street. Apparently, Williams was trying to locate a house and having difficulty doing so. Farmer stopped the car. He ordered Williams to get out and asked to see his driver's license.
Your license are in Georgia, state of Georgia or Florida?
Williams said that he did not have his license on him. Farmer elected to arrest Williams for driving under the influence, driving without a license, driving on the wrong side of the road, and driving without a seatbelt. He handcuffed Williams and ordered him into the back of his patrol car.
If you don't put that cigarette down, Willie, I'm gonna be forced to put you on the ground, and then we're gonna have to put you in this car. Now, you can go the easy way, you can go the hard way, but one way or another, you're going in that back seat now. Willie, get in the car.
Sounds like an official bullet for an 18-wheeler. Oh. Southbound I-75 for 31 miles.
Well, you fixing to add more charges to you if you don't get in that car now.
No, he's doing anything wrong.
All right, well, have a seat in that car over there.
Williams would not get in.
Listen. Listen. And what is you doing? You're going to get up and you're going to get in this car. You understand me? Now roll over and get up.
Wait. Don't.
Get up. Get up.
Farmer testified that Williams put up a struggle, and at one point he tripped and fell to the pavement.
Spun one time and started across the street to go away from him. I was going with him, trying to stop him, and he tripped and fell, went down to the ground. This is after I've done told him several times to get in the backseat of the car.
Farmer said he helped Williams to his feet and told Williams once again to get in the car. "It's your last chance," he said he warned Williams as he nudged him from behind. Williams managed to elude Farmer and headed back across the street. Farmer grabbed him and said that he applied a pressure point to Williams's wrist in order to subdue him. At that moment, Farmer said he saw his backup unit coming. He said Williams lurched away again, and that's when he took him down hard to the ground. Farmer demonstrated the takedown maneuver in court. 2 witnesses, Lowndes County Sheriff's Lieutenant Donald Sermons and GBI agent Russell Mansfield, subsequently testified that the procedure was an appropriate means of subduing recalcitrant suspects. Former Jacksonville police officer Vicki English does not agree.
I've been on the streets. I've had to fight people on the streets. There's no excuse for physical force after that point. If the man's in handcuffs, he's reasonably under control. And you have requested backup, as he clearly stated he did in there. All you have to do is stand and wait. Just stand and wait.
What should he have done?
Where was he going to go? He knew who he was. He's in handcuffs. He knew where he lived. Well, I mean, get in the car, go and arrest him. Take out a warrant the next day. The man's still in handcuffs. It's absurd. Are they that poorly trained in Georgia?
In addition to comments about his professional conduct, other observers noted that Deputy Farmer's testimony at the coroner's inquest differed in small but numerous ways from accounts he had given previously. In the incident report that he filed on the night of the arrest, for example, he stated that he placed Williams on the ground while awaiting backup. At the coroner's inquest, however, he testified that he used a pressure point on Williams's wrist to get him to walk back to his car with him. In a third account given by Farmer to the GBI 2 days after the arrest, Farmer said that he took Williams to the ground because he was moving his arms behind his back towards Farmer's gun side and was trying to escape from him. In these revisions, it was apparent to some people who were following the case, members of the People's Tribunal in particular, that Farmer was attempting to, in their words, professionalize his conduct.
One person commented to me, and I write this here for you, it's quite curious how Mr. Farmer's memory provides more and more detail as time goes on. More and more detail ensues. Typically, your memory doesn't work that way. So there is a suspicion that the reason why these details keep getting added is because someone's trying to cover something up.
The district attorney apparently did not notice the revisions, or if he did not bring them up. It was precisely this sort of oversight that led some to question the DA's motives in the aftermath of the hearing.
And considering that there are still federal and civil actions taking place on that case, I really don't think I ought to say anything more specific about the Willie Williams case.
Ms. Bibbins, did the district attorney do his job?
In getting justice? No. In getting a police officer off? Yes, he done a very good job.
What is his job? You don't know. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he presented the case and they had an inquest jury. That's what he's supposed to do, I guess. He did that.
But as far as getting the facts out and presenting the facts, yes.
Well, he sure didn't act like any prosecutor that I've ever encountered. Very interesting. He seemed to be defending the sheriff's office very clearly. He certainly wasn't seeking the truth. There are a lot of questions that were not asked.
Much of Farmer's testimony may have seemed plausible to jurors because they heard only audio portions of the arrest, as recorded by Farmer's squad car video camera. Visual confirmation of much of what transpired was not possible because the two men were outside the range of the video camera much of the time. And even when the cameras captured events, the images were ambiguous. Furthermore, the videos were not replayed for purposes of careful scrutiny, and when one juror asked if the quality could be enhanced, he was told that for all intents and purposes that it could not.
When Mr. Blandon's patrol car come up and showed the lights on Mr. Farmer and Mr. Williams, we asked, what was that? We couldn't see to the side where we could see a flashlight going up. We knew it that he was hitting. And they thought that we were so, I don't know whether ignorant to the fact or what. When we asked them, could it be enhanced? No, it would have to go to NASA. You know better than that. We knew better than that. We knew that those films could be blown up. And
Deputy Farmer was not the only witness whose testimony changed over time. Dr. Clark, the medical examiner, gave strikingly different accounts of Mr. Williams's injuries. In his initial report, filed on September 2nd, 1998, the day of Williams's death, he cited blunt force injuries of the head and neck as the cause of death, adding that the transverse partial fracture of the C6 vertebra had resulted in acute hemorrhage into the surrounding tissues. At the coroner's inquest, however, he described a small amount of hemorrhage in the right neck area, but this was a very minor injury. Also noteworthy was his failure to mention at the coroner's inquest the two 1 to 1.5 centimeter recent full-thickness oval contusions in the bilateral parietal occipital scalp that he had noted in his autopsy. Similarly, when summarizing his earlier findings on the soft tissues of the neck area, he wrote that this histologic picture suggests a very acute injury. At the coroner's inquest, he changed his description of that injury to not a significant injury. Regarding Mr. Williams's chest, Clark earlier reported that ribs 3 through 5 were fractured and that the injury was accompanied by a modest amount of acute hemorrhage. At the coroner's inquest, he testified that these fractures were slightly displaced with very little bleeding into those tissues. He also suggested that the fractures were the results of administering CPR. Why the discrepancy in Dr. Clark's testimony? We contacted him to see if we could find out. He wrote us back accusing us of bias and sensationalism while declining to become involved in our project. We persisted in our attempt to clarify his key testimony, pleading with him to tell us how we had it wrong and urging him to set the record straight. We received no response. Predictably, many in the community believed that Clark was simply covering up. They went back again and again to the cronyism in Lowndes County that allegedly links the sheriff to the district attorney, a city councilman, a local businessman, 2 superior court judges, one with a brother who manages a bank and doubles as the sheriff's campaign manager, and the local newspaper. Charles Moore reports for the Lake Park Post.
Sheriff is the most powerful person in this country, in this county, I'm sorry. In this county, he has extraordinary power. Judge McLean has a lot of power. He's the chief superior court judge. And that's a district attorney, can indict anyone.
So what you literally have is a very tight-knit group of people in the judicial system and the law enforcement system that are protecting one another.
The inquest testimony concluded. 30 witnesses had been called. 208 pages of testimony had been taken. The jury began deliberations. By all accounts, they were difficult. Nonetheless, they were quick. After just 1 hour, the jury ruled 3-2, along racial lines, that Willie James Williams's death had been accidental. The decision implied that Williams's death was, in the words of Coroner Charles Exum, unintended, unforeseeable, and unexpected. One of the jurors, a white woman, told the Valdosta Daily Times that a charge of involuntary manslaughter against Deputy Farmer was unwarranted. He was doing his job, she affirmed. Jury foreman Stuart Mullis reached the same conclusion.
I have no hesitation with that. The evidence that I heard, if a law enforcement officer in the fulfillment of his normal duties causes an injury that results in the death, if he's doing his normal takedown procedure, that he did right. It's an awful thing to say, but that's the way the law says.
Juror Eddie Kuntz, however, disagreed. Williams's death could have been avoided, he said.
To me, I thought, to me, that he did cause his injury. I can't say it's death, but the way I looked at it, I think he caused his injuries, and then everything after that led up to his death.
Moreover, in the eyes of Mr. Kuntz, the entire inquest process was a farce, staged only to lend the appearance of due process and the pursuit of justice.
So they paraded us in, and there was 3 whites and 3 blacks, and I'm thinking that it was going to be like balance, but once we got in and heard all the evidence and whatever, and then we got back to the jury room, it was like 3 whites and 2 blacks, because they made one of the blacks an alternate. I mean, I went in with the mind that it was going to be different.
Kuntz was also upset that Coroner Exum had told the Valdosta Daily Times that the jury's decision had been unanimous. Once again, the newspaper had helped create the wrong impression in this case.
How is it that the critical third juror in that 5-member jury was selected as white and the alternate was chosen to be black, because it came down to racial mathematics?
Ordinarily, the code says that the sheriff shall draw the jurors. In that case, we didn't think that would be appropriate where the person dies in the sheriff's custody. So the coroner and the foreman of the previous grand jury, because you draw them from the previous grand jury, they made the selection of those jurors.
Juror Delois Bivens.
What I didn't like about the jurors called for the inquest, it was 6 people called. They knew 5 of them were going to serve. It was set at 3-2. Now that really upset me. And so I told them, no, I don't think that we should go with doing your job, that it should be involuntary manslaughter or manslaughter. True, we jurors did get ugly. We tried not to, but we did get ugly with each other. Surely enough, it come down to, I said, well, a black and white. I said, I hope that it wouldn't have to come to this, but is this a black and white issue? And the ladies say, well, you're saying that Mr. Farmer did it because he's white, and we're saying that Mr. Farmer did his job. I said, oh, in other words, because Mr. Farmer, if had he been a black policeman, where you felt like he was doing his job, well, you know, it was silence then. And it just went on and on and on.
Where it got to the point where we were like trying to convince them. You know, the 2 black jurors, the 2, you know, me and the lady that was on the jury, started trying to convince them, did you see it? Did you see this? Let's look at it, you know, and then it got to one of those like shot match, you know, and matter of fact, I walked out the jury room itself. I just couldn't take any more of trying to convince them. I was trying to get them to see it my way, I guess, you know, because I thought my way was right.
Jury foreman Stuart Mullis recalls the same moment.
The jury room was 6 people trying their best. The people who served on that inquest were in a small sphere of our culture, were great citizens. They took a tough situation. It was done the way that the founders of our country and our system, and going all the way back to England, I guess, set things up where a group of peers hear the evidence and make a decision.
What would have happened if there had been 3 blacks and 2 whites?
I don't know. You know, I know what you want me to say. You want me to say that it would have been divided equally the other way on racial lines. I don't know that.
District Attorney Miller was ready for allegations of racial bias.
I guess the premise of that question is the supposition is if there had been 3 blacks on the jury and 2 whites and 1 white alternate, that the vote necessarily would have been to refer to the grand jury for criminal charges. You know, I don't know that would have been the situation, but assume for a moment that it is. Mm-hmm. All that means is that their decision is turn it over to the grand jury, recommend to the grand jury that they look at, which was done anyway.
Indeed, when the case was taken before the grand jury, the decision to recommend a no-bill action against Deputy Farmer on the charge of involuntary manslaughter was made. Criminal charges against him would not be pursued further. The criminal phase of the case was ostensibly over. The case would now enter the civil phase. Meanwhile, the Valdosta Daily Times kept the town riled up with its daily printing of biting comments phoned into its rant and rave hotline. Members of the People's Tribunal lacked confidence in the way in which the case was prosecuted and were unwilling to acquiesce as in previous instances. They continued to meet and to organize, and they commenced their own investigations into the case. They persisted, they said, because they believed the local investigation was shoddy, and also because this case was not an isolated incident. One of the first moves they made was to request the jail booking tape of Willie James Williams. As Dr. Ari Santos explains, every person brought to the Lowndes County Jail is booked before being put in a cell.
There is a video room in the receiving area, video camera in the receiving area, which records the booking of everyone brought to the jail. The camera runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Sheriff Paarents himself has boasted this fact to at least one organization, I believe it was the Kiwanis Club, during a tour of the jail. It should seem strange at the very least that this particular period of time is the one during which the taping process broke down. It is also strange that Paarents has said that anyone who fails to do his or her task of keeping the tape would be fired if they did not perform the task. Yet no one, I believe, has even reprimanded.
In seeking the booking tape, the tribunal hoped to clear up the mystery raised by Dr. Jonathan Paarents at the coroner's inquest. Paarents was on duty in the emergency room at South Georgia Medical Center the night of Willie James Williams's arrest. He testified that he noted no serious injuries when he treated Mr. Williams. If it were the case that there were no obvious injuries, the People's Tribunal reasoned, then how did Mr. Williams go from looking like this to looking like this? The People's Tribunal was hopeful that the booking tape would show what condition Mr. Williams was in when he arrived at the Lowndes County Jail at 7 a.m. on September 2nd, 1998. There was more than a little suspicion that he was beaten at the entrance to the jail, as Avery Woods allegedly had been, or that he was beaten inside the jail. Surely the booking tape would furnish some answers. Attorney Joe Wiley, representing the Williams family, requested, in accordance with the Open Records Act, a copy of the booking tape. He was ignored, so he filed suit in Superior Court. At the hearing, which took place on September 28, 1999, Sheriff Paarents testified that the booking desk tape ran out sometime during the night of Williams's arrest, and that a fresh tape was not loaded into the camera until around 8 a.m. This, despite his prior boast before the Kiwanis Club that the camera runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The judge in the case, Frank Horkin, ruled that Mr. Wiley would have to prove the existence of the booking tape before the court would order that it be turned over. As it began to amass new evidence, the People's Tribunal began holding public meetings to inform concerned citizens what it had discovered. It got the Williams arrest videos enhanced and put together an exhibit, which it began presenting to various groups in town. Through the fall of 1999 and the winter of 2000, the People's Tribunal presented its evidence to the Valdosta City Council, the Lowndes County Commission, the Valdosta Area Ministerial Alliance, U.S. Congressman Sanford Bishop, the U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia, and the Lowndes County Sheriff's Advisory Committee. The latter group, the brainchild of church ministers and members of Valdosta Project Change, was constituted in the aftermath of the death of Willie James Williams in February of 1999. It viewed the video presentation on January 13, 2000, and less than a month later its chairman, Reverend George Bennett, wrote Sheriff Paarents the following letter.
I believe that Willie James Williams was killed in the custody of the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department, and therefore his death occurred somehow at the hands of employees of the Sheriff's Department. And I cannot say personally that I'm convinced that it occurred at the hand of the officer that arrested him. I think personally it occurred in some other way, probably in the jail.
On December 14, 1999, word came from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Macon that criminal proceedings were not to be closed. Deputy Farmer sued editor Al Parsons on February 11, 2000. The People's Tribunal remembered Willie James Williams at Valdosta's Martin Luther King Memorial on April 8, 2000. On August 28, 2000, attorney Joe Wiley filed suit on behalf of Avery Woods. The suit accused the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office of unreasonable search and seizure, excessive force, denial of medical treatment, false imprisonment, and malicious prosecution. Sheriff Polk won the primary election on July 18, 2000. He was quoted in the Valdosta Daily Times as saying that the vote was vindication for Kevin Farmer. Later that month, he gave members of the Lowndes County Grand Jury their annual tour of the jail, as is required. Jurors did not speak with any prisoners, nor did they get to visit the infamous old stockade portion of the jail. Instead, they toured one of the newer prison pods. They admitted to the Valdosta Daily Times that they did not know what to look for. Nonetheless, they gave the jail their stamp of approval. On September 5, 2000, 2 years after the death of Willie James Williams, attorney Joe Wiley filed a $12 million wrongful death civil suit on behalf of the Williams family. Named as defendants were Sheriff Ashley Polk and Deputy Kevin Farmer. So, although the venue has changed, from the streets to the courts, the struggle over the meaning of Willie James Williams's death continues. Who gets to assign meaning to his life and his death? The answer to that question still turns on the question of who killed Willie James Williams.
Mr. Morris, who killed Willie James Williams?
The lifestyle of all of us killed Mr. Willie James Williams. The lifestyle that requires us to have law enforcement, that requires law enforcement to be trained in a certain way, because if they're not trained in a certain way, they'll be sued. And a lifestyle that allows, the last known legalized drug, alcohol, to be sold, advertised, promoted. A lifestyle that requires that we punish offenders, lock them up.
That he was beaten, and from the looks of it, he was beaten, because a fall wouldn't have did what was on James. I always believe he was beaten. I don't care what nobody say.
The history teaches me that any time a culture continues to teach a racist, an anti-Semitic, or any kind of propaganda that places any of our human beings in a lesser position, then you're inviting violence, you're inviting the dehumanization of part of the human race.
Imagine myself in a situation where black skin privilege existed. That when I walked into a store at about the same time that a black person did, well, there was a black person who standing there who owned the store and waited on the white person first, or a white person goes through a line, doesn't have to show an ID, and a lack of trust, looked at with a suspicious eye, all your life. Turning on, you get it through the media, newspapers, magazines, television, white faces time and time again. How does that affect somebody psychologically?
The whole damn system, but I think the instrument was Kevin Farmer. I think if Kevin Farmer hadn't beaten that man, he'd be alive today.
I have confidence in the legal system. Each case runs its course, and in almost all instances, the right outcome comes about.
Who do you feel killed Willie James Williams?
I think the system. The system. It was a number of things. Mr. Farmer started the process. the jail, the hospital. You know, it's a number of things. What the thing that led up to it was Mr. Foreman. That started the process from there to the emergency room, from the emergency room to the jail, from the jail, wherever. You know, it's a whole bunch of checks and balances that should have been checked. It wasn't checked because he was, what, a drunk or drinking? But he's a human being.
Who killed Willie James Williams? Kevin Farmer killed him. Maybe it didn't start out as intention to hurt Willie James Williams, but that's the way it ended up. Whether it was intentionally or as they say, involuntary or what, it ended up that Mr. Williams died as a result of what Kevin Farmer did to him. Right or wrong, he's dead on account of Kevin Farmer.
We got our job to do. It doesn't say whether you arrest rich, poor, white, black, you know, whatever. It says enforce the law. And
last question, Vicki. Who killed Willie James Williams?
I could easily say a racist society killed Willie James Williams, but his cause of death was blunt force trauma. That only came from one place, and that was the night of his arrest. But the person that struck the blow killed him. That's just simple law.
Do you have a theory about how Mr. Willie James Williams died?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay.
I feel that he was beaten. And they did it. They beat that damn man. And everybody, I don't want to talk about that. I don't even want to talk about that.
They had to be.
I get offended about that. I don't want to talk about that.
Look
I
at
get real upset about that.
the pictures that they take you, the mugshot they take you when you first come in. You can look at him and tell they beat the hell out of him.
They beat.
If he looked like that when he came in, they beat his ass before he got in there. And ain't no telling what they did to him when they got him in there.
The people that are responsible for Willie James Williams' death are those who don't want the truth to come forward. Those who will turn their backs on the truth, and those who will close their eyes to the facts, in this case, are the ones responsible for killing Willie James Williams. Because as those who actually killed him in the jail will do it again, will always be exonerated as long as those are responsible don't hold them accountable.
We have to fight, although we have to cry. We got to hold up the blood-stained banner. We got to hold it up until we die. I said we are soldiers in the army. We have to fight, although we have to cry. We have to hold up the blood-stained banner. We have to hold it up until we die. My mother, she was a soldier. She had her hands on the God's supply. But one day she got old, she couldn't fight anymore. She said, I'll serve him until I die. I said,